Have you ever noticed that the people who are just the most obsessed with personal development are often like the most profoundly paralyzed by it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you look at their bookshelves and it's just it's an absolute graveyard of abandoned
Right,
philosophies.
completely contradictory ones,
Yeah,
too.
exactly. On one shelf, you've got, a stack of books telling you to completely detach from your ego and just meditate into pure nothingness.
Yeah, the ascetics.
Right. But then right next to it, literally on the same shelf, is a stack of biohacking manuals. And those are telling you to relentlessly optimize your dopamine, track your REM sleep, and conquer your morning routine.
It's a very schizophrenic landscape.
It really is. And if you're just starting out, if you were just figuring out how to build a better version of yourself, it doesn't feel like stepping onto a path.
No, not at all.
It feels like walking into this massive, chaotic power of babble. Like every single expert is just screaming at you in a completely different language.
Well, and that paralysis, I mean, it's important to realize that isn't a failure of willpower on your part.
Right.
It is a structural failure of the current psychological and, well, the wellness industries as a whole.
How so? Like structural in what way?
Well, you have clinical psychology operating on one silo, right? And then contemplative traditions in another. And then executive coaching is somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, they don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
Right.
They all possess these incredibly valuable puzzle pieces regarding human flourishing, but they are using completely incompatible vocabularies to describe really the exact same underlying mechanisms of change.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are going to hopefully provide you with a universal translator.
Yes, a much needed one.
We're looking at a single, highly concentrated source today. It's a June 2026 concept paper, and it was published by the Spectrix Metaphysical Institute.
Right.
It's titled CMP, which is an acronym for Consciously Articulated Metaphysical
A
Principles.
very academic title.
Yeah, a bit of a mouthful. But before that title scares you off, our goal today is to strip away all that esoteric jargon. We're going to unpack this framework because it essentially boils all of this noise down to just four essential domains of growth.
And it's really important to establish upfront what this document is and maybe more importantly, what it adamantly refuses to be.
Yeah, tell me about that, because they were very specific about this.
They were. The authors deliberately released this as a version 1.0 position paper.
Right.
They are explicitly not claiming to have invented some new proprietary method for enlightenment that, you need to buy into.
There's no masterclass you have to purchase at the end.
Exactly. Instead, CMP is an observational framework. The researchers at Spectrix, they basically spent years observing people who are actively undergoing intentional transformation.
Across all those different modalities you mentioned earlier.
Yes, therapy, spiritual practice, really intense coaching. And they simply started mapping the architecture of what actually worked. What were the common denominators?
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to challenge the premise right out of the gate.
Fair enough.
If they are just observing what already exists, why do we need another paper? I mean, we already have thousands of them. Science and lived experience are constantly at each other's throats anyway.
They are.
I always think of it like an architect and an interior designer fighting over a house.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like the neuroscientist is the architect. They only care about the load-bearing walls, the electrical grid, the literal, gray matter of the brain.
Yes, the structure.
But the spiritual guide or the therapist, they're the interior designer. They care about the phenomenology, the lived experience, how it actually feels to sit in the room.
And they usually despise each other.
Exactly. They spend all their time arguing over who is right. But you literally need both to turn a house into a home. So how does CAMP actually resolve that friction rather than just being, another voice in the noise?
Well, it resolves it by just flat out refusing to treat subjective experience and biological data as enemies. What's fascinating here is how the framework acts as a bridge language. When a neuroscientist talks about, say, downregulating the amygdala,
Right.
and a mindfulness teacher talks about finding stillness, they're actually describing the exact same human phenomena.
They just don't realize it.
Exactly. Without a shared structural language, they talk right past each other. So CAMP organizes the human experience into four dimensions that apply equally, whether you are, looking at an fMRI scan or reading a teenager's journal entry.
Wow. Okay, so it bridges the gap.
It does. It argues that neuroscience validates the mechanisms, like how practice physically reshapes the nervous system, while lived experience provides the nuanced qualitative data that a double-blind study just simply cannot capture.
So it's essentially saying, like, stop arguing about whether the mind or the brain is in charge and just look at the actual coordinates of change.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the first of these 4 coordinates, domain 1. The paper labels this consciousness.
Yes.
And the guiding question here is deceptively simple. It's just, what am I noticing?
Right. And we need to be careful here because the term consciousness in this framework has a very specific operational definition.
Right. It's not the medical definition.
No, not at all. It's not about the medical state of being awake versus being comatose.
Okay.
In CAMPA, consciousness refers to the mechanisms of awareness, attention, and meaning-making.
Meaning-making.
Yes. Is the core recognition that human beings are never passive recipients of objective reality. We are highly active interpreters.
I read that section and I immediately thought about predictive processing in the brain.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the idea that we aren't just taking in the world like a video camera. Our brains are essentially locked in a dark skull, hallucinating what is happening outside based on past data.
Right, your prior experiences.
And then we just use sensory input to correct the hallucination.
That is exactly the biological mechanism underneath this domain. We construct our reality. And the paper illustrates this with a phenomenal example of how meaning-making literally dictates your physiological reality.
Walk me through that.
Okay, imagine a specific physiological event. You have an elevated heart rate, a rush of cortisol, shallow breathing, and maybe a tightening in your chest.
Okay, I'm stressed just hearing that.
Right. But that is just raw data. The question is, how do you interpret it?
Okay.
If your internal framework interprets those somatic signals as a threat, so you're about to do a public speaking event, you experience crippling anxiety.
Yeah, panic.
However, if your framework interprets those exact same biological signals as excitement or readiness, you experience a flow state.
That's wild, because the body is doing the exact same thing.
The raw data didn't change at all. The meaning-making changed everything.
But hold on, if I'm a beginner, right, I'm
Yep.
listening to this and I might think, okay, so I just need to notice my surroundings more.
Right. Like being observant.
Yeah, but growth in this domain isn't just about paying better attention to the external world,
Yeah.
is it? It's not about noticing a bird outside your window and thinking, wow, I've reached a higher plane of consciousness.
No, not at all. Growth in this domain is deeply internal, and it's structural. It means shifting from having an experience to observing the experience.
Having versus observing.
Yes. For a beginner, this looks like developing the capacity to catch your own automatic predictive narratives in real time.
Catching yourself in the act.
Exactly. It's the gap between feeling an emotion and becoming aware that you were feeling it.
Give me a tangible example of what that gap actually looks like in daily life.
Okay, imagine you receive a very brief, punctuationless email from your manager.
Oh, I hate those. Just, we need to talk.
Exactly. A low consciousness reaction is an immediate reactive spiral. My boss hates me. I'm going to be fired. I'm failing.
Yeah, you just merge with the panic.
Right. You are fused with the narrative.
Eh.
A leap in consciousness, according to TMP, is the ability to insert a wedge of awareness.
A wedge.
Yes, to pause and say, I am noticing that my chest just tightened, and I am noticing that my brain is currently constructing a narrative that I am in danger because of a short email.
It's like you pull back from the movie screen and suddenly realize you're just sitting in a theater.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
You realize you are the active interpreter. You begin to map your own cognitive distortions instead of just believing them.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though,
Yeah.
because I know people who are hyper-aware, like incredibly conscious.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. They have spent a decade in therapy. They can articulate their childhood trauma perfectly. They know exactly what their attachment style is. They map all their cognitive distortions.
Yeah.
And their lives are an absolute disaster. They are miserable because just noticing things doesn't actually change anything if it doesn't lead to a cohesive life direction.
You've just identified the ultimate trap of isolated awareness.
It is a trap, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awareness without intentional direction inevitably devolves into narcissistic rumination.
Wow. Narcissistic rumination.
You just spin out on your own flaws indefinitely. That is why CMP vehemently rejects the idea that consciousness alone is the goal.
It's just step one, or, well, one coordinate.
Exactly. It immediately forces us into the second domain, which is alignment.
Right. And the guiding question here is, what matters most?
Yes.
I found the paper's definition of alignment incredibly sharp. It defines it as the congruence between espoused purpose and lived behavior.
Yes. Congruence.
It's not about what you post on social media. It's about your literal daily friction. What are you actually doing?
The paper uses a phrase I find very compelling. They call it integrity in the sense of integration.
Integration. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it in physics or engineering. Structural integrity means a building holds together under a load.
It doesn't collapse when the wind blows.
Right. Psychological alignment is the exact same thing. It is the continuous, rigorous choice to gather the fragmented, competing parts of yourself and point them in a coherent direction based on your deeply held values.
The gap between espoused values and lived behavior is fascinating to me because, we all do it.
Oh, constantly.
Behavioral economists call it revealed preferences. We state one thing, but our actions reveal what we actually value.
Yes, your feet vote.
Right. Someone might say, my physical health is my #1 priority. But if you audit their calendar and their bank statements, their behavior tells a radically different story.
Always.
The calendar says they prioritize clearing their inbox at midnight. The bank statement says they value DoorDash over meal prep.
And this is where the framework becomes highly pragmatic for someone at the beginning of their journey. Growth in the alignment domain is not about reaching some enlightened state of pure harmony.
It's not about being perfect.
No. It is fundamentally about the capacity to say no.
Oh, that's hard.
It is. It is the biological and social friction of rejecting opportunities, impulses, and even relationships that do not serve your stated direction.
But saying no is biologically expensive.
Very much so.
We are social primates. If I say no to my boss who wants me to work late, my amygdala screams that I am going to be kicked out of the tribe and left to starve.
Which is exactly why alignment is framed as a continuous practice. It's not a permanent achievement.
So you don't just, achieve it and you're done.
No, you don't just figure out your values on a weekend wellness retreat and then coast for the rest of your life.
Right.
Every single time the environment shifts, every time you get a new request for your extremely limited resources of time and attention, you have to actively renegotiate your alignment. It is a constant dynamic tension.
I really like that because it removes the guilt. You haven't, failed at alignment just because you got off track on a random Tuesday. You just have to do the work of reintegrating.
Exactly. It's just data.
But let's be real. This logically leads right into a massive roadblock.
Okay, what's the roadblock?
Well, I can know my patterns. That's consciousness.
Yes.
And I can know exactly what my values are and what I should do. That's alignment.
Right.
But what happens when my toddler is screaming, my car just broke down, and I haven't slept in 2 days?
The system crashes.
Right. My prefrontal cortex, the logical, value-driven part of my brain, essentially goes offline. All that alignment goes right out the window because I am functionally operating out of my brainstem.
And that biological reality is exactly why the third domain exists.
Thank goodness.
Yes, the framework acknowledges that insight and values are utterly fragile if you cannot regulate your nervous system.
Okay.
So domain 3 is modulation. And the guiding question is, how do I influence my state?
This is the domain of agency, right?
Completely.
It's the rejection of the idea that we are just passive victims of our biochemistry or our moods. But I want to push past the surface level here because a lot of self-help talks about changing your state in a very, toxic positivity kind of way.
Oh, yes. Just smile and the world smiles with you.
Exactly. Just manifest good vibes.
Yeah.
How does CAMP define modulation mechanically?
It defines it strictly through the lens of the autonomic nervous system. Modulation is the intentional intervention in your own internal experience.
Intervention.
Yes. It relies on the biological fact that our cognition, our emotional affect, our physiology, and our external environment are all locked in a bidirectional feedback loop.
Meaning they all affect each other back and forth.
Exactly. If you alter one variable in that loop, you mechanically force the others to adjust.
So if I can't think my way out of a panic attack because my cognitive brain is offline, I have to use a different entry point into the loop.
Precisely. You can't logic your way out of a biological threat response. The text provides 3 very distinct examples of how we can modulate our state.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first is physiological intervention, specifically utilizing the breath.
Right.
Now, we often hear take a deep breath as a cliche, but neurologically, it is a hack into your parasympathetic nervous system.
How does it actually work?
When you intentionally elongate your exhale so that it is longer than your inhale, you are engaging the vagus nerve.
Okay.
The vagus nerve literally squirts acetylcholine onto your heart, acting as a biological brake pedal. It physically slows your heart rate.
Wow.
And your brain reads that slowed heart rate and concludes, well, my heart is beating slowly, so we must be safe. And it stops pumping cortisol.
That's amazing.
You have modulated your state not through willpower, but through biology.
Okay, what's the second example?
The second is cognitive modulation, specifically through language.
Like affirmations.
Not quite. We touched on this with consciousness, but here it is used as an active tool. It's called affect labeling.
Affect labeling.
Yes. When you are overwhelmed, your limbic system, the emotional center, is highly active.
Right.
If you actively force yourself to use precise language shifting from "I am completely falling apart" to "I am experiencing a high volume of stress right now, but it is temporary," you actually force blood flow back into the prefrontal cortex to process that complex language.
So you're stealing the blood back.
Exactly. You literally drain metabolic resources from the panic center to the logic center.
Yeah.
You modulate the intensity of the emotion just by naming it accurately.
I love that. The language isn't just descriptive, it's an actual lever you pull. And the third example the paper gives is environmental design.
Which is so often ignored.
Right. This is one that I think a lot of highly intellectual people just completely gloss over. We think we should be able to outthink a bad environment.
You can't outthink biology.
But the text argues that your physical space can either support or completely sabotage your nervous system.
Think about it. If you are trying to do deep aligned work, but your phone is buzzing every 3 minutes, and your desk is covered in unpaid bills.
Your brain is constantly processing micro-threats.
Exactly. Modulation isn't just internal. It is the act of physically removing the phone from the room.
Right.
You are outsourcing your modulation to your environment, so your brain doesn't have to burn precious energy resisting distraction.
I want to try out an analogy here, because I think a lot of people think of emotional regulation like a light switch.
Like on or off?
Right. You are either panicking or you are perfectly calm, but based on what you're saying, it's not a switch at all. It's more like sitting at a massive mixing board in a recording studio.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like you don't just hit one button to make a song sound good.
Yeah.
If the track sounds muddy, you don't throw away the song. You pull down the bass a few decibels, you bump up the treble, you add a little compression.
Yes.
Modulation is realizing that you are the audio engineer of your own internal state. You can pull the physiological lever of your breath. You can tweak the cognitive dial of your language. And you can adjust the environmental fader of your room, all to mix a state of mind that actually allows you to function.
That is a profoundly accurate metaphor. Because an audio engineer doesn't control the raw acoustics of the room, do they?
No.
But they control the mix. You don't control the external stressors of life, but you have the dials to mix your internal response to them.
Right.
Moving from being a passive listener to becoming the active audio engineer is the essence of growth in the modulation domain.
But, and I know this is where the hammer drops in this framework,
It is.
knowing how to use the mixing board doesn't matter at all if you only walk into the studio once a year. I can know perfectly well how to do a physiological side to calm my vagus nerve. But if I only remember to do it after I've already yelled at my partner and ruined dinner, the tool is completely useless. Insight is cheap.
Insight is incredibly cheap. And that hard truth brings us to the fourth coordinate. Domain 4, practice.
Practice.
Yes. And the guiding question here is the ultimate test of all personal development. How do I live what I know?
Practice is the domain of grit. It's repetition, embodiment, and habit formation.
Yes.
And the paper is incredibly blunt here. It states flat out that understanding alone does not constitute change.
Which is a devastating critique of the entire podcast and audiobook culture we live in.
Truly, you can consume 100 hours of content about trauma, values, and nervous system regulation. You can have these massive intellectual epiphanies.
Oh, yeah.
And you still wake up the next day and behave exactly the same way you always do.
Because intellectual understanding happens in the cortex. But automated behavior is stored deep down in the basal ganglia. To bridge that gap, the source material introduces a concept that makes modern audiences very uncomfortable.
Discipline.
Discipline. However, it radically redefines the word. It strips away all the punitive drill sergeant connotations.
Okay, so what is it instead?
The paper defines discipline as a loving commitment to show up consistently with intention.
A loving commitment that completely changes the texture of the concept.
It really does.
It's not about punishing yourself for being lazy. It's about having enough respect for your own stated alignment to actually do the reps.
Exactly.
But I do have a bone to pick with one of the foundational assumptions the text makes in this section.
Let's hear it.
It uses this very specific phrase. The person who practices courage repeatedly becomes courageous.
Yes.
If I'm perfectly honest, that sounds suspiciously like fake it till you make it.
A lot of people feel that way.
Right. It sounds like you're just pretending to have a virtue until you brainwash yourself into believing it.
That is a very common but fundamentally flawed critique of behavioral activation.
Okay. Why is it flawed?
Well, fake it till you make it
Yeah.
implies deception, right? It implies that your external action is a lie masking your true internal reality.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of neurobiology, CMP is arguing something entirely different. It is relying on neuroplasticity, specifically Hebbian theory. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Okay, break that down for me. How does the action actually create the identity without it being fake?
When you feel terror, but you make the conscious choice to take a courageous action anyway, you're forcing a new neural pathway to fire in your brain.
Okay.
At first, that pathway is weak. It requires immense, exhausting amounts of prefrontal cortex energy to override your fearful impulses.
Right, it's exhausting.
But every single time you repeat the action, every time you practice, your brain wraps that neural pathway in a fatty substance called myelin.
Myelin.
Yes, myelination acts exactly like insulation on an electrical wire. It makes the signal travel exponentially faster and with way less energy.
Oh, so you aren't faking courage. You are literally biologically constructing the physical infrastructure for courage in your brain.
Precisely. You don't accuse a weightlifter of faking being strong when they are struggling to lift a 20-pound dumbbell.
No, of course not.
They are practicing the lift so the muscle adapts. In the CAM-MP framework, action precedes identity. You do not wait until you feel like a courageous person to act.
You'd be waiting forever.
Exactly. You commit to the practice of the action, and your biology eventually catches up to make it your default state. Transformation is not a sudden flash of lightning. It is the slow, unglamorous accumulation of repeated behavior.
So what does this all mean when we put it together? We have consciousness noticing your patterns,
Right.
alignment defining your values, modulation regulating your nervous system, and practice repeating the behaviors.
Yes, those are the four.
Now we arrive at what I consider the absolute genius of the CAM-P model. The paper explicitly, and I mean aggressively, rejects the idea that these four domains are a ladder.
The rejection of linear stage-based models is probably the most radical structural element of the whole framework.
Really? Why is that so radical?
Because the authors note that human beings are completely obsessed with sequential progression. We want a syllabus.
Right. We want to know what step one is.
We want to complete level 1, get the badge, and move to level 2.
Well, because the self-help industry gamifies growth.
It does.
It sells you the introductory course on awareness and then upsells you the masterclass on alignment. It demands a ladder so it can sell you the rungs.
But biological systems don't work like ladders. They work in feedback loops. CMPP presents these four domains as simultaneous coordinates. They are an ecosystem you inhabit. They constantly, recursively influence one another across time and circumstance.
The paper actually walks through a hypothetical progression to prove how this continuous loop works in reality. I really want to trace this out for you because if you are listening to this and feeling overwhelmed, this is the part that completely sets you free.
Let's walk through it. It's a great example.
Okay. In the text example, we observe an individual who enters the framework purely through the practice domain.
Right. They do not start with a deep psychological excavation of their childhood trauma.
No. They simply make a loving commitment to a daily 20-minute walking routine without their phone.
That is their entry point, just physical practice.
Right. And what happens? Because they are consistently engaging in that quiet practice, the silence acts as a mirror.
Yes.
It naturally begins to cultivate consciousness. They start noticing that every single time they hit the 10-minute mark of the walk, their brain starts catastrophizing about their finances.
And they weren't trying to be highly aware. The practice just forced the awareness.
Exactly. The domain of practice fed right into the domain of consciousness. Now, step 3. This newly illuminated pattern of financial panic forces them to look at their alignment.
Right.
They realize there is a massive gap between what they value, which is stability and peace of mind, and their actual behavior, which is avoiding their budget and overspending to soothe their stress.
This gap demands a choice.
It does. They decide to align their behavior by sitting down to restructure their debt.
But the second they open that spreadsheet, their nervous system absolutely spikes.
Oh, yeah. The fear of seeing the actual numbers sends them straight into a fight or flight response. The alignment work is blocked by biological panic.
Which triggers step 4. They must deploy modulation.
Right. They recognize the physiological spike, and they utilize a breathing technique. Or perhaps they just step outside for a moment to change their environment.
Anything to downregulate their amygdala enough to actually look at the screen.
And finally, step 5. Recognizing how difficult that was, they realized that managing this financial reality is going to require sustained effort.
This generates the need for further practice.
Exactly. They commit to checking the budget for 5 minutes every single morning. That new practice deepens their consciousness regarding their relationship with money, which refines their alignment, and the loop just continues infinitely.
Do you see why this is so incredibly liberating?
It really is.
Because it means there is no correct starting line. You can jump into this ecosystem wherever it makes sense for your exact psychological state today.
That is huge.
If you are deeply intellectual and aware of all your flaws, but you are paralyzed by anxiety, do not start with more consciousness work. You will just intellectualize your trauma.
Right. Start with modulation instead.
Yes. Learn to control the mixing board of your nervous system.
Yeah.
Or, if you're totally numb and disconnected, don't try to figure out your life's purpose in the alignment domain.
Just start a physical practice. Move your body and trust the loop to eventually wake up your consciousness.
It democratizes personal development. And crucially, the recursive loop dismantles a very toxic hierarchy that's embedded in self-improvement.
What hierarchy?
The illusion that higher stages represent superior humans.
Oh, wow.
When you view growth as a ladder, you inherently believe the person on rung 10 is fundamentally better than the person on rung 2.
Which breeds incredible spiritual ego.
Exactly. But a circle has no top rung. You can be highly practiced in your physical health and completely unconscious in your romantic relationships. You will continually cycle through these domains as life presents new variables.
It's a playground, not a syllabus.
I love that phrasing.
Now, before we wrap up, we need to talk about the engine block underneath this whole framework.
The foundational axioms.
Yes. The final section of the Campy paper outlines 3 foundational axioms, the working propositions that make this entire loop function in the first place. We've bumped into them organically today, but synthesizing them really shows just how robust this model is.
We'll go through them.
The first axiom is, meaning shapes perception.
This touches on the predictive processing we discussed earlier, but it takes it a step further into the realm of lived reality.
Okay, how so?
The text states that we only perceive what our current psychological frameworks prepare us to perceive.
Right.
This is known in cognitive science as top-down processing. If your internal framework dictates that the world is a fundamentally hostile zero-sum environment,
your brain will effortlessly filter in every perceived slight, every piece of bad news, and every aggressive driver as absolute proof of your worldview.
Exactly.
And it will simultaneously filter out evidence of kindness, support, or opportunity because that data creates cognitive dissonance with your framework.
The data is there, but you are literally blind to it.
Which means transformation is not just about changing your behavior. It is about intentionally shifting the meaning you assign to reality. When you do the deep work to change your framework, you suddenly see resources and options that were invisible to you yesterday, even though they were sitting right in front of you the whole time.
The second axiom is perhaps the most succinct justification for why we do this work in the first place.
Sure.
It's awareness influences choice.
The paper says, what is conscious can be changed. What remains unconscious compels us.
That is the cornerstone of all depth psychology. Carl Jung famously said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you have a deep, unexamined pattern of self-sabotage triggered by a fear of success, you will continually blow up your own relationships or career right when things are going well.
Because the pattern is unconscious, you have no agency over it. You will just blame the universe or bad luck or other people.
But the second you drag that pattern into the light of the consciousness domain, the second you observe it happening, it loses its dictatorial power.
It might still be uncomfortable, right? You might still feel the urge to self-sabotage.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
But you are no longer a puppet on a string. You now have a choice in the alignment domain to act differently.
And the final axiom the text provides is one that serves as a vital corrective to modern self-help. It states, relationships influence development.
Yes.
The text argues that isolation severely limits psychological development while connection accelerates it.
This raises such an important question. The vast majority of the optimization and wellness industry is hyper-individualistic.
It really is. It's my morning routine, my boundaries, my biometrics, my truth.
It creates this illusion that you can retreat to a mountaintop, perfect yourself in isolation, and then return to society as a flawless being.
But KMP insists that human flourishing is a multidimensional, profoundly relational phenomenon.
Interpersonal neurobiology proves that our nervous systems literally co-regulate with the people around us.
We are shaped by the communities we practice within.
Exactly. You cannot truly test your alignment or practice your modulation in a vacuum. You only know if you have developed courage or patience when you are in the messy, frustrating friction of actual relationships.
We develop in contact with others, not in retreat from them.
Beautifully said.
I love that this version 1.0 document anchors the entire high-minded framework back into the messy reality of sitting across the dinner table from someone you love.
Yes, it keeps it grounded.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of territory today. If you are looking to build a reliable roadmap for your own growth without getting lost in the weeds of 10 different disciplines, remember the 4 coordinates of the CMP loop. First, consciousness. What am I noticing? The shift from experiencing your life to observing the narratives you construct about it.
Second, alignment. What matters most? The gritty, continuous practice of making your actual behavior match your espoused values.
Third, modulation. How do I influence my state? Realizing you are the audio engineer of your own nervous system, using breath, language, and environment to regulate your biological response.
And fourth, practice. How do I live what I know? The loving commitment to repetition, trusting that neuroplasticity will eventually turn your conscious effort into an automated identity.
And critically, remember that these are not steps to be conquered. They are a continuous, dynamic loop. A shift in any one of these coordinates will inevitably demand adaptation in the others.
I really feel like this framework accomplishes the mission we set out on. It proves that you do not need a PhD in neuroscience or a decade in a monastery to start your journey.
No, you don't.
CMP gives us a shared, structurally sound bridge language. As the authors themselves write in the conclusion, you don't even need to know the framework to engage in the practice.
The framework exists solely to serve the practice. You don't need to understand the vagus nerve to take a long exhale.
The accessibility is its greatest strength.
Yeah.
And as we conclude, I want to direct your attention to a final, rather profound challenge embedded in the closing reflections of the Spectrix paper.
Okay. What is it?
The source material emphasizes that human beings possess a fundamental, innate drive toward growth and integration.
Right.
However, it warns that this capacity is not automatic.
Right.
It requires intention, it requires humility, and it requires a fierce honesty about your own current coordinates.
You cannot passively consume your way to transformation.
No, you cannot. But consider the implication of the authors deliberately releasing this as version 1.0.
They explicitly invited dialogue, critique, and evolution.
They did. They are acknowledging that the map is not the territory, and the map is not yet finished. So if you choose to actively participate in your own flourishing using these 4 domains, how might your own lived experience eventually help rewrite version 2.0? How might your unique, messy loop through consciousness, alignment, modulation, and practice reveal new patterns of human potential that the researchers haven't even seen yet?
Now that is a powerful thought. You aren't just reading the map. By walking the territory, you are generating the data for the next evolution of it. Your personal development isn't just about making your own life better, it's contributing to the broader understanding of what we are capable of.
Absolutely.
So step out of the chaotic library, drop the broken instruction manuals, pick just one coordinate, and start your practice today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring.